Don't get drunk and break into the cemeteries in New Orleans. And if you do, don't piss off any of the tombs with a bunch of X marks all over it. I did that 6 days ago, Saturday, and I've died every day since. After leaving the cemetery that night, I stubbed my foot stepping out on the curve and broke my neck on a wall outside a bar. I dreamed of a woman that night. She wore a white dress and stared at me. But I couldn't have dreamed anything. Do the dead dream? Sunday morning, I woke up in my bed with no hangover. I had a clear head, which was rare for me in the morning, but the details of the night before were a little hazy. I checked myself out in the mirror, but didn't see any signs of damage. I remember tripping on the curve, then the wall of the bar rushing up towards me. I was so drunk that I didn't put out my hand to catch myself. Then, only blackness. Pushing the thought away, I started my day. I left my apartment and walked down the block to the corner diner. Most mornings, I needed coffee to chase away my hangover. No hangover that morning, but the craving was still there. I sat at the counter and ordered. A tall, very dark-skinned man was sitting at the counter. He was dressed in an old-fashioned dark purple suit. He had coattails and all. He stood as I sat down and said good morning, and made his way out of the diner. "Be seeing you later," he said to the diner. Everyone ignored him. I turned and looked at him as the door was slowly swishing shut. He tipped his hat to me as he was putting it on. His smile was yellow like his eyes. As the door swung shut, I could see him lighting a cigar. I think he winked at me. After my coffee, I walked over to Jackson Square. Maybe the fortune teller could tell me something. They all turned me down. The real ones did, at least. You can tell which ones are real. After the failure, I walked back towards the river. A carriage horse got spooked by some tourists lighting firecrackers, and caved in the side of my head with a kick. Monday, I woke up again in my bed. This was really happening. I searched the news, but there were no stories about a horse killing one on Decatur Street. I gave in and decided that the only thing for me was to get nice and drunk. I was sober for a whole day. That was an accomplishment for me. Well, sober for a morning at least. That night, I tied one on. I couldn't get enough. At one point, I think I remember that tall guy from the diner buying me a drink. "What's this?" I asked, as he handed me a double shot of something dark. "Oh, it's always rum for me, baby," he said before throwing back his shot. I didn't care. I would have drunk anything that night. "Be seeing you around," he said, before fading into the crowd of the bar. I was shot in the back while walking home. They killed me for the $9 I had in my pocket. In my dreams that night, the lady in white was sitting on a short stool with her back towards me. I walked towards her, but she never turned around. No matter how close I got to her, no matter how far I stretched my hand, I couldn't touch her. Tuesday, I decided to stay in. If I didn't go out, I couldn't die, right? My thought was to drink a fifth of vodka and try to take a bath. I must have passed out because when I came to, the water was freezing. I slipped getting out of the tub and bashed my head on the rim of the toilet. I still couldn't reach the woman in white. She was working with something in her lap. Every time I walked around to her front to see what she was doing, I would just be looking at her back again. Wednesday, I believed the bed would be my sanctuary. Surely nothing bad can happen to you in bed. Things were going well until I smelled the smoke and heard the sirens. The fire must have started in an apartment below me. I threw open my front door and ran for the stairs. They collapsed as I made my way to the landing. Since I was on the top floor, I had nowhere to go. Resigned, I walked back inside. People were staggering out of my building onto the street below. A crowd formed across the street, and some of them were pointing up at my window. The tall man was standing amongst them, smiling up at me. He tipped his hat as my floor collapsed, and I fell into the inferno below. I found out what the woman in white was working with. This time she was standing. She had a dead chicken in her hand. With a quick motion, she twisted and wrenched the head from the bird. She began chanting and moved in a circle, making a ring of blood on the ground around her. I called to her, but she ignored me. right before I woke up, she glanced up at me, glaring into my eyes. By Thursday, I'd given up. Whatever was happening to me was out of my control. My room was like it always was. No sign of a fire. As soon as I got up, I went straight for Bourbon Street, because the bars never closed there. With an empty stomach, I got to work. Even on Bourbon Street, drunks aren't well tolerated before noon. After getting kicked out of the third bar, I sat down on the curb with a big-ass beer. The tall man sat down beside me. We were quiet for a few minutes before I asked him, "Why is this happening to me?" Now, don't worry about that, Cher. Just a few more days and it'll all be over. Now, if you hurry, there's a party bus carrying a bachelorette party about to cross Bourbon Street just a few blocks that way." He pointed down the street. "The driver is a man a lot like you. He's out way too late last night and might not have all his faculties about him." I nodded and stood up. The tall man called to me as I walked away. "Au revoir, mon ami." The bus plowed right through the stop sign. He was right. The driver never saw me. The bus squealed to a halt too late, with me trapped underneath. I could smell my skin melting on the scalding undercarriage. The driver ran out and saw what he'd done. He turned away and vomited as the party rushed out of the bus to see what was happening. A pretty lady wearing a sash that read "Bride" saw me and dropped her tall green novelty drink. The last thing I heard was the screams of her and her bridesmaids. The woman in white walked towards me in a dreamy way that night. She held a dusty bottle with no label that was full of some kind of dark liquor. She stood in front of me and took a big pull from the bottle. With a look of disdain, she held the bottle out to me. I reached for it, but she pulled it away and spat the liquor in my face. She began chanting something in French Creole and walked around me in a circle, stopping periodically to tease me by holding the bottle out in front of her. Every time I reached for the bottle, she would pull it away, take another swig, and spit it back in my face. Her chanting continued in between her taunts. Finally, she stopped and stared at me with hatred. "Time to wake up, fool," she said. It wasn't English, but I understood her. She took one more long pull from the bottle, blood beginning to dribble from between her lips, and spewed it back onto me. I shot up from my sleep and was horrified to find my face and chest covered in blood. I cleaned myself up and spent the rest of the day wandering aimlessly around my apartment. Eventually I headed out and walked around the corner until late into the night. The tall man would be waiting for me in the doorway or the window of a bar, always with a shot of rum held out for me. I just ignored him and walked on. Well after midnight, near the edge of the quarter, I saw her waiting for me on a distant street corner. "Last chance, mon cher," said the tall man, from the doorway of a quiet bar. The bar was dark because it was closing up. It was hard to make out the details of his face, but it looked like he was wearing white paint in the shape of a crude skull. I took the offered shot and drank it down slowly, savoring the burn. She rounded the corner, and I followed. As I walked, I lost sight of her, but she would always be there when I turned a corner or a car passed by, just standing and staring at me from a distance. Eventually, I found myself walking next to the tall white wall. An opening in the wall revealed a huge ornate iron gate. I stopped at the gate, and it slowly swung open, creaking on its centuries-old hinges. Of course, back where this all began, the cemetery. My feet carried me down the boulevard of this miniature city of the dead. She was gone again, so I scanned the side alleys for her. I saw a flash of her white dress between the crumbling tombs, so I ventured deeper into the cemetery after her. She was waiting for me next to a tomb. The tall man stood with her. When I stopped in front of them, he turned and removed the name plaque from one of the open crypts. The stale air that billowed out smelled of musty decay. He bowed low and gestured me inside. I began to weep, but I still climbed in. I turned onto my back in the tight space and looked up. He smiled at me and said, "It's been a pleasure. Truly. He lifted the plaque back up and sealed me inside, covering me in sweet darkness. Finally, I can rest. Day 1. I keep having nightmares that I'm trapped in a box. These came out of nowhere, and I've never had any recurring dreams more than 2 days in a row. Something is always different, but these nightmares are exactly the same. That's why I'm starting this diary dream journal thing. In these dreams, I'm in a box, but it's all kind of blurry, like when you try throwing a punch in a dream and it moves in slow motion. That's how it's been every single time, 4 nights in a row. I read that having a dream journal helps you lucid dream, so I can slowly manipulate my dreams with practice. If these dreams continue, I should be able to change them eventually. Day 2. Same dream again last night. I feel like the dream is actually becoming a bit cleaner. I'm not positive, so I'm not going to get my hopes up. Day 3. The dreams are actually becoming clearer. I had no idea if this dream journal idea would work at all, much less so quickly. I've been reading up on dreams more and decided to set an alarm so that I can catch myself waking up in the middle of my REM cycle. This should make it easy so that my dreams become more lucid. Day 3 continued. Well, I tried setting multiple alarms to keep falling asleep and waking up, but I'm just not really tired today. I set an alarm to wake up early tomorrow, so I'm sleepier during the day. Day 4. I feel too well rested again. My apartment is starting to feel a little small, ironically. It's a 500 square foot apartment, so it's not huge, but it's enough for one person. I did decide to get rid of a few extra throw pillows, extra being the key word. It's probably just a side effect of the dreams. Feeling like I'm stuck in a box every night isn't great. It never lasts long, but it's right before I wake up, so it's always still so vivid in my mind. Oh well. Day 5. Major breakthrough. Was finally able to move around while stuck in the box. It's very uncomfortable and is definitely made of cardboard, but that's progress. I could even hear a slight white noise in the background. That was all, though. I woke up, and for once, I didn't want the nightmare to end. I love seeing progress. Looking forward to tomorrow. Day 6. Honestly, who even invented throw pillows? I got rid of all of them I had. My bed looks so nice and clean. Optimal for dreaming. I could smell the cardboard last night. Day 7. Everything is surprisingly clear in the dream now. I could feel the cardboard, and it's pretty solid. There's not much give at all. I don't have any way to get out. I'm too cramped to kick or punch, and I don't have any blades or anything. I think with enough lucid dreaming I could conjure one, but at that point, wouldn't I be able to just magically dream the box open? Maybe I could give myself laser vision to burn through it. Too much Superman on the brain recently. Day 8. I thought day 7 would mark 1 week, but technically, day 8 would be 1 week, right? I'm not sure. I just realized that the dreams become more lucid when I get rid of things. And honestly, my apartment has been feeling small every day since 4. My stuff isn't too expensive, so we'll just get rid of a bunch of things. It's kind of funny. Day 9. Nothing different in the dreams. I'm still unable to move or do anything. The white noise sounds sort of like an engine or something. It's a low hum. I don't know if realizing more things about it will help me escape, but can't hurt, right? I'll just focus on everything I can during the dreams. Day 10. Maybe I've been going about this wrong. Maybe I need to force another dream instead of trying to change this one when it happens. Time to focus all my efforts today on one thing: cooking. The mix of smell and tastes will make my day very memorable. So hopefully my dreams will have me in a kitchen. Day 11. Woke up screaming today. I didn't have a different dream, and this time I felt like I could barely breathe, like the air in the box was running out. I screamed in the dream, then I screamed in real life. Not the wisest tactic when you're running out of air, but it's not like I have much control over these dreams. Can't even control myself sometimes. My apartment was feeling a little stuffy, so I got rid of my couch and some spare blankets and towels. More air should help. Day 12. The dream is the same every night, but honestly, my real life is starting to feel like a nightmare. I keep feeling like my apartment is getting smaller. I get rid of some stuff today. Just things I don't need. It wore me out, so I'm sleeping early tonight. Day 13. The issue seems to be my big furniture taking up so much space. My TV stand, my bookshelf, my desk. I got rid of all of it, and it's not feeling as cramped, but I don't know how my apartment is feeling so small. Nothing different in the dreams. I'm constantly trying to escape with no way out. Focusing on making things apparent doesn't work. Day 14. I got rid of my shower curtain today. My floor gets more wet now, but when I was taking showers, it was feeling too cramped. Luckily, I have a washer-dryer unit in my closet, so I can reuse my towels as needed. Who would have known those spares would be missed? I smelled a little oil in the dream today. Day 15. I swear my apartment is getting smaller. I've no idea how, but with the big furniture items gone, I'm unable to comprehend how I even fit them in here. I'm going to try sleeping on the floor tonight and see if I can get rid of my bed too. Day 16. The dream was the same, and I slept surprisingly fine. The bed's already gone at the time of writing this. All the small things I kept on the bookshelf too. I have them in a storage container, but I haven't really assessed them in a while, and they're taking up space, so those are going too. Day 17. I was doing a load of laundry today, and when I turned around, my closet felt incredibly tiny, so I took a hammer to the wall, and now it's an open wardrobe laundry area. My bedroom's a lot bigger thanks to that, but my security deposit is definitely gone. Oops. On a serious note, I think I'm developing, or have already developed, claustrophobia to a degree that it should be treated by a professional. I've already scheduled a meeting with a psychologist today. Bringing up this dream thing seems like a good idea. It's about time an expert analyzed it. Day 18. I took out my bathroom wall today, right after I woke up. calmed down after that, but it felt like I couldn't control myself. This obviously isn't sustainable, and I'm definitely going to have to pay a lot when I move out, but I really need to worry about my mental health issues first. Future me can figure out the finances. Day 19. I figured out that I'd done plenty of damage already, so a little more wouldn't hurt much, right? I coaxed myself into getting rid of the washer-dryer, the fridge, the range, and cabinets. Took a lot of straps, pulling, pushing, sliding, and probably damage on my spine that I just can't feel since I'm young, but somehow I did it. I do not recommend trying it for yourself, but I bet almost anyone actually could if they wanted to. It was surprisingly painless, or am I surprisingly strong? I don't know. I feel great. I have the psychiatrist appointment in 2 days. I wonder if I would have kept my things had it already happened. Day 20. My room is basically one big empty room now. I've been sleeping on the pile of what few clothes I still have. I have this journal, my phone, and the internet. What else does someone need these days? I know I should be concerned, but when I wake up in the morning, I was feeling so anxious and cramped. It was so bad that now I just feel relaxed. It's literally crazy, I know, but that's what tomorrow's psychiatrist appointment is for. Oh, these changes in my life actually made me appreciative of the dream, since it remains the same. Day 23. It's been a few days since I last wrote. On what would have been day 21, I woke up feeling extremely cramped. I felt like I was almost in the box in my dream. My shower felt like I was almost reachable from where I was sleeping. As a matter of fact, everything in my room felt like I could almost touch it. I had no idea this was what people with claustrophobia felt like. I went to the psychiatrist, and they were afraid of what would happen the next few days, as the rooms would keep getting smaller in my head. They weren't sure what I would do when cornered. They suggested a hospital that they know really well, and I've been here since. There was a 48-hour hold before I could have my journal. They give us tasks and activities to do, and honestly, everybody else in here seems to have it worse than me. Few people are very depressed, but otherwise normal in social situations. So they're the only ones I really talk to. My room is extremely nice and accommodating. My wall is basically a giant window, so I can see things happening outside at all times. I've still been having the dreams about the box, but my waking hours are so much more peaceful now. I turn my journal in every day so they can read what I'm writing. I didn't actually have to do this, but they asked if I would, and I didn't mind. I'm not really crazy in any other way, so it's fine if people read this. Day 27. They asked if I wanted my journal each of the last few days, and I said no. Basically, because honestly, there weren't any updates. The dream has been the same, but the reason I'm writing this now was because the room has been feeling a bit small. I kind of feel like I'm a fish in a tank. They let us go outside a lot, but it's not like I can camp out under the stars. I guess this is kind of my plea for help, too. Hey, doctor, figure something out. Just kidding. Kind of. Day 28. They put stars in my room, those glow-in-the-dark ones that people have as kids. It was a sweet gesture. I hope it helps. Day 29. It doesn't help. I woke up in the middle of the night, and I guess the stars had lost their charge from the daylight because my room was dark. It felt incredibly small, almost like the box. Day 37. They wanted to see if my journal could have been the issue, so we went a week without it, which was fine. I'm really just trying anything to get better. Something really bad happened, though, so they decided I could have my journal back. I punched and slammed my head into the wall repeatedly because I felt like it was closing in. They both bled a lot, and I lost some hair. But I didn't feel like I had a choice. I didn't want to get crushed by the walls. My body sort of just moved on its own, you know. The room feels like a tiny fishbowl during the day. And the night, that's when the box comes back at night. I was having a hard time distinguishing my dreams from reality this past week. I think I figured it out, though. The expression, pinch me, I must be dreaming, is accurate. Pain is the key. I just wish my hand and head hurt instead of the box being so uncomfortable.
Sleep paralysis is a devastating condition. When I was 7, I first had sleep paralysis. My mother tucked me in that night. I could remember the citrus fragrance of her perfume. Her scent always comforted me. After she tucked me in, I quickly drifted off to sleep. The night seemed quiet, but the peaceful atmosphere in my bedroom didn't last. I woke up around midnight. A smothering sweat drenched my small body. I couldn't move my arms and legs. I could only move my eyes and my lips. It took my eyes some time to adjust to the thick darkness in my room. While my eyes were struggling to see, that's when I heard it. I could hear it snorting, a dreadful feeling coming over me when I heard the inhuman sound. I could see someone standing in my closet after my eyes adjusted. It peeked at me from behind my closet door. It stood there for a minute, snorting at me. When it lurched out of my closet, I finally saw its full body shape. Its elongated arms stretched out like tree branches. It was tall, but it had a feminine shape. It looked like a deformed 7-foot-tall naked woman. I tried to scream, but nothing came out. It felt like something paralyzed my vocal cords. After this shadowy figure stepped out of my closet, it stood in the corner of my room with its arms out. It would release a guttural snorting sound every few minutes. The sound was sickening. It reminded me of someone hawking and spitting on the ground. I could see this figure. I'm listening to the horrible noises it makes while I'm paralyzed. The moonlight came in through my bedroom window. It illuminated a part of the shadowy woman's arm. Her skin looked like mud. It didn't look burnt, just darker than dirt. All I could see was her one arm stretched out across the bedroom wall, bathed in moonlight. My mind kept trying to figure out what she was. I thought I was looking at a demon for the first time, or possibly the devil. Movements occurred, but not from me. I still couldn't move my body, no matter how hard I tried. It felt like invisible hands were holding my arms and legs down. The movement came from the shadowy woman. I watched in horror as she made a step towards the foot of my bed. She would take one step, and then she'd hesitate for a moment before taking another. Her awkward hesitation sent more chills through my body than her measured baby steps. I knew she was going to kill me if I didn't move. Frustration tortured me just as bad as my fears. I didn't know what this thing was or why it was in my bedroom. I didn't know what it wanted. The scary stories that my dad told me about the boogeyman came back to me. So I had this naked creature creeping towards me while thinking about my dad's stories and how he told me the boogeyman captures children at night and they never come back. Thanks a lot, Dad. I wanted to move so badly. I wanted to scream. It felt like I was fighting my body. The voice in my mind yelled at my body, telling it to move. The dark woman mocked me with her hesitant steps. She inched closer. and closer to the foot of my bed with her arms stretched wide open. A crazy thought went through my head. Since I couldn't move my body, I thought maybe the feeling would be numb. I assumed the creature would viciously attack me, but at least I wouldn't feel pain. I could see her long fingernails pointing out to me, and I knew those fingernails would be the first thing to dig into my body. No pain. Please, no pain. This is what I kept telling myself. Just be calm, Miranda. When the monster grabs you, you won't feel it. It won't hurt. Your body is numb, so you won't feel anything. Tears were in my eyes while I was telling myself this. I wanted my mom to save me. I wanted to see my mom's face, and I wanted to smell her perfume. I wanted to call out to my dad. My dad told me to never be afraid of anything, and that's what I tried to do. Time was running out for me. My urge to move was so strong that I started imagining that I could move my arms and legs. I thought I could move my arms, but it was just a hallucination. This was torture. Why was this happening to me? I was just a kid. I had just turned 7, and now I was going to die on the day after my birthday? I'll never go to high school, meet new friends. I'll never graduate from college. I'll never get married. I'll never find out what it's like to be a mom. The best thing I could do was close my eyes. I didn't want to see it attack me. I just buried my eyelids behind the tears. I said a prayer that my mom had taught me. My lips and my voice were still useless, so I had to say the prayer in my head. The prayer repeated in my mind. My mom and dad taught me to believe in God. I needed God to save me. My mother always told me I was God's child, and he had angels watching over me. I wanted his angel to save me that night, and I didn't see him. A demon was making its way towards my bed, and God was just going to sit there and watch it kill his child? My young mind couldn't understand what was happening. I thought the dark figure was a demon, a little girl who knew for sure she would die in her bed. More chills traveled up and down my spine when I opened my eyes to see the giant shadow woman standing over the foot of my bed. She changed her position. Before I closed my eyes, her arms were spread out as if she wanted to hug me. When I opened my eyes, she was standing motionless in front of me, her long fingers over her lips. She was telling me not to make a sound. I couldn't make a sound anyway, so when I saw her holding her fingers to her lips, it didn't matter to me. My situation turned upside down when I heard something else. Something unexpected happened. There was evil in my room, but the evil that stepped into my room was not the Shadow Woman. I remembered hearing news stories about missing children in town. My mom wouldn't let me out of her sight whenever we went to the store. There were reports of a crazed man in a clown costume going around abducting children. The police were searching for him. They couldn't find him, but they found his aftermath. They found 2 missing children dead in a wooded area. As a child, I couldn't completely comprehend the danger. When you're a kid, you want to play with your friends. I wanted to play with the other little girls in the neighborhood, but my mom would always keep me close to her side. On my birthday, I went to an amusement park, but I couldn't enjoy myself because I would go from being in my mom's arms to being in my dad's arms, constantly being carried around the park like a doll. I hated this smothering, overprotective behavior by my mother. She passed her paranoia to my father, who would normally allow freedom in my playtime. My childhood freedom ended for a little while because of a child-killing bastard. Somehow, the killer entered our home through the basement window. He stayed hidden in our house for 2 days. This is how he broke into other people's houses, and he would hack into alarm systems and shut them off. Most of the missing children's news reports involved children being taken from their homes in the dead of night without their parents even knowing what happened. A few days later, their children's naked bodies would be found in a nearby pond or in a dumpster. Mothers and fathers were losing their babies to a middle-aged, 6.5, 250-pound psychopath in a clown outfit. We didn't know that the psychopathic clown broke into our home 2 days ago. We didn't know he was hiding in the basement. I was only a child, so he thought one little girl in the house would be easy prey. He picked the wrong house that night. I heard him creeping down the hallway right outside my bedroom door. His footsteps were quiet, but clumsy. The hardwood floor in the hall would always creak. My bedroom door creaked open, and I saw his tall shadow hunched over in the doorway. I remembered hearing my pounding heart, my eyes shifting between the killer clown and the dark shadow woman. I couldn't believe I was seeing these 2 nightmarish figures standing in my bedroom. One figure was evil, while the other was good. He was wearing clown makeup. He had a red painted nose, and he wore a pair of sunglasses over his chalky white face. I could see he had a beard. He had a pink afro wig, and he was shirtless. He had an imposing physique, like a wrestler. I also saw a massive tattoo of a wolf's face on his chest. The large butcher's knife he clutched in his right hand immediately caught my eye. Even in the darkness, I could see the knife's serrated blade gleaming. He was so big that he blocked out my doorway. I didn't know what to do. There was nothing I could do. Just lay there, helpless. I started imagining that I could scream for help. My imagination was cruel, it seemed. I hated my body for not moving. I hated my voice for not letting me scream. I knew I was awake because he spoke to me. "Hi there, little princess. I'm your new friend. Your mommy went away and asked me to take care of you." When he said my mom went away, my heart sunk deep in my chest. As he got closer to my bed, I could see something dripping off the knife, and I didn't want to know what it was. When the child killer spoke to me, his voice didn't fit his body. His voice sounded androgynous. It had a deceptively feminine quality. It's terrifying to see a mountainous man in clown makeup talk softly down to you through a teenage girl's voice. I kept thinking about Pennywise from the movie It, but imagine Pennywise if he was shirtless with the body of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. I closed my eyes again when I saw the killer towering over my bed, getting ready to swing down with that butcher's knife at my face. I expected to feel cold, sharp steel slice through my nose, but none of that happened. I shut my eyes, but I couldn't keep them shut for long. The child killer had so much of my attention that I'd forgotten about the shadow woman, who was still standing at the foot of my bed. I remembered hearing the man scream out a curse word, and then I heard a snap. I could still make out through the darkness what was happening. I saw the killer clown's arm hanging in another direction. I'll never forget his guttural, blood-curdling scream as it pierced my ears. His scream echoed throughout our home. I thought that even the neighbors could hear him. What happened next made me almost pass out from shock. I saw the dark shadow woman lifting the child killer by the throat. She hurled him into the wall, and a penetrating thud shook my bedroom. I kept hearing the man begging for his life, and he sounded so pathetic. He just kept screaming out, "What are you? Please don't kill me, ma'am." But the dark woman had no pity for him. She bludgeoned him with his knife. I watched her break both his legs. She punched him in the chest so hard that I heard bones and chest cave in. I heard his rib cage cracking. After a few minutes, his verbal pleading became whimpering moans of agony. I didn't know that you could break bones in a human body in so many ways. After twisting the bones around in his arms and shattering the bones in his knees, I watched the dark woman raise the child killer off his feet again. She held him over her head before shoving the butcher's knife into his throat, nailing him to the wall, quite literally. I never blinked as I stared at what had happened to the killer. I almost felt sorry for the sick son of a bitch. No, not really, though. The dark lady made him pay for all the children he had abducted. She made him pay for his attempt to kill me. After the violence ended in my bedroom, I watched as the shadow woman moved towards my bed. She stuck out her arms again while moving towards me. It looked like she was floating in slow motion. My heart was still pounding, even when I felt her clawed fingers breezing through my hair. When she touched my face, I could smell a familiar fragrance. It was that citrus aroma from my mother's perfume. I couldn't understand why the shadow figure smelled like my mother. I didn't understand it until later. The shadow woman hovered over me. Her lips stroked my forehead. She caressed my face for a few minutes, and then she vanished when I heard my father's panicking voice coming from downstairs. I didn't want to believe that I saw blood on the killer's knife, but it was blood. It was my mother's blood. That asshole stabbed my mother to death right before he made his way upstairs towards my bedroom. He left my mother's body lying in the kitchen. My father stepped out of the house to get a few things at the store. When he came back home an hour later, he found my mom's body lying in a pool of blood. Her lavender, sleeveless nightgown was soaked in red. My father cried out when he saw her body. I heard him running up the stairs, crying out my name. When he bolted into my room, I was already in his arms before he could switch on the bedroom light. He saw the man's body nailed to the wall and lost his breath. I told him what happened and what I had seen. He couldn't believe it, but he had no choice. He knew that a little girl didn't have the strength to nail a 250-pound man to the wall. My father called the police, and when they arrived, they asked me a few questions. I told them everything. Like my father, they stared at me. A policewoman caressed my face and said, "It's okay, sweetie. You had a traumatic experience. Who you saw in your bedroom was just a good Samaritan wearing a costume." None of the police officers believed that I saw a dark shadow woman. They all believed that my trauma caused me to hallucinate. They even told me I might have seen my father killing the man, and I told them my father wasn't in the house. He had told my mother that he was going to the store. I heard him kiss my mom before he left the house. Those cops didn't believe my story. They had tons of sympathy for me, but I wanted my mother more than I wanted sympathy. I missed my mom, and I couldn't stop thinking about her fragrance. I found the perfume she wore while moving some boxes around in the attic. That sweet fragrance took me back to that night. I believe the dark figure I saw in my bedroom that night was my mother, a dead version of her. I'm 36 years old now, and I think about my mother every day. I got married to a kind and beautiful man, and we had a son. My little boy is 5 years old, and he has his mother's hazel eyes and his daddy's dimples. I try to be an excellent mother, and I'm very protective of my little one, just like my own mother was protective of me. Every night I tuck my son in bed and read him a bedtime story. One night, I told him about what had happened to his mom when she was 7 years old. He looked scared after I told him the story. My son is afraid of the dark, but I told him not to worry. I told him that his mother's love will protect him and can reach beyond death even. I told him I'd always be there to protect him. I told my baby not to be frightened if he sees a dark shadow woman standing in the corner of his bedroom. I told him she'll watch over him while he sleeps. I also told him not to panic if he wakes up suddenly, unable to move his body. Sleep paralysis is scary at first, but I told my son that his paralysis will be a sign, letting him know that the shadow woman is there to protect him from things that go bump in the night. There was one thing I didn't tell him, though. I didn't tell him that the black shadow woman standing in the corner of his bedroom might be his mommy, if she dies the way her mother did.
You ever heard of Millie, the hanged lady? That's what Josh, my best friend, asked me one night while we were camping in the woods. Seriously, is this another story you made up, Josh? Asked Sue skeptically. No, this is 100% true, seriously. You guys never heard of this? I shrugged my shoulders in denial. Josh loved telling stories, especially the urban legends he'd read on the internet. Most likely he'd prepared a dozen of them in advance for tonight. The story begins one night in the forest. Forest where we just happened to be, Josh began seriously. I smiled out of the corner of my mouth and exchanged a glance with Sue, who knew as well as I did, now that he was off and running, there was no stopping him. You see, Millie was a high schooler like the three of us, and ever since she was a little girl, she'd been picked on by the other kids. Millie was different from the others. She always kept to herself, didn't dare speak up, didn't mix well with the others, and soon she became the target of others' abuse. Over the years, her reputation followed her, and the harassment from the other kids in her class became increasingly cruel. Sue kept her neutral expression, but I could feel that the story touched her. She, too, had struggled to fit in after her parents had moved her here, and it was only after befriending Josh and me that she'd managed to come out of her shell. But if she hadn't, she might have been subjected to the kind of behavior on display here, too. In fact, she had confessed to me that this had even been the case at her previous school. One wintry evening, several students decided to play a prank on Millie, Josh continued, the flames from the campfire reflecting his eyes. They all grabbed scary masks and armed themselves with knives and chased Millie as she made her way home through the forest. Millie was terrified, and she fled as far as she could. She got lost in the forest. The story goes that during the night, cold, lost, and hungry, she found a rope stretched over a branch, like an invitation, and that was where she ended her life. What a horror, Sue said, still captivated by the tale. Since then, they say she haunts these woods, and that it's possible to summon her by repeating certain words. Cut the crap, I said uncomfortably. I swear it's true. All you have to do is stand in front of a branch and say, Millie, Millie, why are you so alone? 3 times. Then turn around and say, Millie, Millie, come talk to me. Just once. Then you'll hear the sound of a rope swinging under the weight of her body. And the story goes, if you're unfortunate enough to turn around and look at her, she'll kill you. Okay, that's definitely nonsense. No, really, Josh. You had me going at first, but I don't believe it anymore, Sue said, standing up. You'll excuse me, boys, but I'm going to hit the sack. Good night, and don't stay up too late tomorrow. We're leaving early. With that, she headed off to her tent. Josh and I stayed up a while, staring at the fire in silence, but as if he couldn't hold back any longer, he finally asked, Do you want to do it? Do what? I asked him. Well, repeat the sentence and everything. Come on, we've been walking around picking mushrooms all day. What the hell? I had a feeling that if I didn't agree, he'd ask me every night until I gave in. So, I preferred to take the lead. We found ourselves in front of a branch a few dozen feet from the camp, where the fire was beginning to fade. We had equipped ourselves with our flashlights to see where we were going. Josh seemed pretty excited. Have to admit that once we got to the branch, I was more apprehensive than I would have imagined about some stupid urban legend. You're the one doing it, Josh told me. Why me? It was your idea. It was your story. But I've already done it 15 times. Come on, it's your turn, man. Don't back down now. I huffed. This was pretty typical of Josh. I stood in front of the branch, flashlight in hand. Josh gave me the sentence to repeat 3 times, and with a stutter or two, I managed to get it right. I turned around, my back to the branch. Josh stood next to me because he said if he looked, it wouldn't work. Millie, come talk to me, I finally said in a whisper. Hey, don't shit yourself, Josh laughed. We waited for a few moments. Well, I don't hear any taunt rope noises. I guess that means I get to live. Maybe she was busy elsewhere tonight, Josh replied with a laugh. Come on, let's go to bed. It's starting to freeze out here. We headed back to the camp. I couldn't help but look back for a moment while holding my lamp in front of me. For a moment, I could have sworn I saw something, moving from right to left near the tree where we'd been for a few moments. Damn, I really got to stop listening to Josh's stories. I was awakened sometime later by a scream. I scrambled to my feet, ears pricked and wondering if I'd imagined it. I could see through the canvas of my tent that it was still dark outside. Josh, Sue? I called aloud, our tents being right next to each other. No answer. Why the hell aren't they answering? If they're playing a prank on me, I'm going to kill them. I grabbed the flashlight from my tent, my cell phone, and quietly stepped out. Josh, Sue, I asked again. I lit up their tent in turns and noticed they were both open and empty. I couldn't remember clearly what I'd heard, but I thought the scream was from a girl. I couldn't believe for a second that Sue would participate in a prank like this, but if it wasn't that, then maybe something serious had happened. As I stood there trying to think about where they might have gone and what they might be doing, a strong wind blew. To my right, a few dozen feet away, I spotted something moving. Josh, I swear to God, if this is one of your stupid jokes, I said, as I slowly approached, my flashlight trying to shine through the vegetation around me. I walked towards where I thought I'd seen the movement, and finally I saw something just to my right moving again. Slowly, heavily, I heard the sound of a taut rope. I shone my flashlight from bottom to top, and there I saw Josh, hanging by his neck with a rope tied to a branch over a tree. I was silent for a few seconds at the shock. Josh, please, stop this. His face was contorted in an expression of sheer terror, eyes revolted back, His skin was blue, lifeless. I nudged him with my hand, and he just rocked back and forth a little. I couldn't believe it. It must have been an elaborate prank on his part. It wasn't possible. Not Josh. He was glowing with life. He would never take his own life like that, in the middle of the night, on a camping trip. The reality finally dawned on me, and I was overcome by a violent sob. My legs buckled, and I threw up on the ground. As I wiped my mouth, my eyes misty with tears, I heard something impossible. The sound of a taut rope slowly swinging right behind me. I straightened up, the sensation of mortal danger just behind my neck. "Who's there?" I asked, my voice trembling and still tight. The rope suddenly stopped moving. "Why don't you look at me?" said a feminine voice from beyond the grave, whose windpipe seemed to be strangled. What? Your friend looked at me. Look at him now. He's so much happier here with me." I remained silent, my eyes fixed in front of me, as if frozen in place. "It's impossible. She can't be real. You're having a nightmare. Wake up, wake up, wake up. Look at me." I ran. I didn't know where, and I didn't care. She'd killed Josh, and now this thing, whatever it was after me. After a minute, I remembered Sue's scream. She must have been awakened like me, maybe by Josh getting up, or when he'd been killed. She must have discovered the corpse, too. With any luck, she'd managed to escape. I figured if she'd gone off with her cell phone, she'd have tried to escape to the nearest road, which was about 15 miles, even though there was no way she could get there before the night was over. I tried calling the police and my parents without success, but luckily the GPS still seemed to work, so I followed the direction. I was walking fast, so as not to collapse on the ground from exhaustion. I was already out of breath, and I couldn't stop. I always made sure to aim my flashlight at the ground in front of me to be on the safe side. The urban legend Josh had told me had said that you had to turn around and look at her for her to kill you, so maybe I shouldn't look her in the eye. I felt like I was being stalked. I flinched at every movement of a branch in the wind, and I constantly felt eyes on the back of my neck. But I was too scared to turn around. I had to get the hell out of the forest. "Sorry, Josh. I promise I'll come back for you as soon as I find some help." I spotted an abandoned cabin we'd seen on the way here. I remembered that Sue had said that this was where we would find shelter if there was a storm or something. Suddenly I saw a light pierce the darkness through the wooden planks of the cabin. I sprinted towards it. Sue, I'm coming!" I shouted out of breath. I stepped inside, the boards creaking beneath my feet. The light streamed in from under the door, and the cabin only had the one bedroom. I crossed the space between me and the door, glad I'd found Sue before I fled this place. I put my hand on the door handle. "Sue?" I paused. Silence was unnatural. Something was wrong. "Sue, are you okay?" I asked through the door, my hand still on the handle. "Answer me, please. You're freaking me out. Josh is dead, and the thing that killed him is still around. We need to get the hell out of here." No response. "Sue!" I noticed the light moving under the door, as if someone was holding the strap at the end of their finger and swinging right to left. No, I said in horror. In response, a childish laugh rang out from behind the door. I ran to the front door, which opened with a shove on my shoulder, and ran straight out of there. After a minute, I collapsed on the ground. It forced me to stop and think about what had happened. Maybe it wasn't Sue. Maybe this thing had managed to grab a flashlight and was just playing games with me. After all, I had no idea the extent of its abilities. I kept my eyes on my knees as I pondered what I'd seen. Then I heard it. The sound which I could now detect amongst any other sound.
The sound of a rope stretching taut, swinging from left to right. Sound wasn't coming from behind me this time. It was from my left. I could feel her sinister gaze, inviting me to look at her and sealing my death in the process. I stood up, eyes on my feet, and started to run to my right, but I was stopped in my tracks. The sound of the rope was now coming from just ahead. Without thinking, I turned in the opposite direction. Again, sound was coming from right in front of me. She's everywhere. I'm screwed. I stood there with my eyes on my feet, trying to think of a solution. Josh was dead. Sue was missing, maybe dead too, and this running around all night. I closed my eyes, and tears quickly formed at the ends. I had an idea. Legend said that it was looking at her that allowed her to kill you. What if I just kept moving forward, looking at my feet, or even closed my eyes? The idea of walking through the forest with my eyes closed sent a chill down my spine. But what other choice did I have? I've been squatting here for several minutes now, writing this message. I've tried to call the police, but every time I call, all I get is static. I don't know where Sue is or how to get rid of this thing. I'm alone, I'm cold, and I'm exhausted. If you're reading this, please help me. Please help me.
My name is Sydney White. I'm writing this because my therapist thinks it'll help. I'm honestly willing to try anything to get a little peace of mind at this point. For my background, this incident began in April of my junior year of high school when I was 16. I'm about average height with blue eyes and long brown hair. My mom and I live alone in an old 19th century Victorian-style house that's been passed down in our family for generations. Someday I'm set to inherit the house, though I'm not sure I really want it anymore. The house is complete with 3 stories, a basement, and a sizable front and back porch. There's a chest-high iron fence surrounding the property. My room's on the 2nd floor. It has a white marble balcony with 2 elegant glass doors leading onto it. Ever since I was little, I'd always adored the house. The ancient black and white photographs of my ancestors, outdated furniture, the relics gathered by family members throughout the years, all instilled in me a longing sense of nostalgia. As a child, I would often just sit in the living room for hours, daydreaming of what it would have been like to live here decades ago, or even centuries before. I would let my imagination run wild with fantasies from times long ago, until eventually Mom would drag me from my stupor and urge me to play with the other kids in the area. This was my only qualm with the house. Due to its old and slightly dilapidated state, I found it very difficult to keep friends. The other kids constantly whispered amongst themselves, and rumors that the house was haunted spread like wildfire on a dry summer day. The creaking of the floorboards and the whistling of the AC unit through the empty corridors were sounds that I'd almost grown accustomed to after residing there my entire life. To the other kids, though, this was hard proof that there were ghosts roaming the halls, waiting to claim their next victim. The same routine would play out time and time again, every time I brought a new friend over. After a little coaxing, they'd come inside, stay for a couple of minutes, then make up some half-hearted excuse to hightail it back home. My humble abode repelled more children than Monster House. Due to this, I didn't have many friends growing up, and the trend continued well into my high school years. So you can imagine my excitement when Alex from my 3rd period English class announced that he was throwing a party while his parents were out of town, and that the whole class was invited. I was ecstatic. I'd never even hung out with the boys, let alone gone to a party. The days leading up to the event were filled with anxious anticipation. I was obsessing over the thought that I might meet a cute boy and have my first taste of alcohol, all in one glorious night. Then the date finally arrived, and I was a bundle of nerves. I'd spent hours curling my hair and perfecting my makeup, convinced that at some point my knight in shining armor would glide in and sweep me off my feet. I had made arrangements to ride to the party with Stephanie, a somewhat nerdy girl who didn't have many friends of her own. I knew she only offered to take me so she wouldn't have to show up to the party by herself, but I didn't mind. Honestly, I didn't want to arrive alone either. After what felt like hours, Stephanie's blue Honda Civic inched up my driveway. I sauntered towards the vehicle, radiating confidence. "Have fun, Sydney," Mom yelled after me, as her gaze followed me down the drive from the spot in the doorway. "And try not to drink too much," she mused with a wink. A smile had spread across her face that I couldn't help but chuckle at. I always thought my mom was gorgeous, a trait that was, unfortunately, not passed down to me. I was reminded of that fact all too often, as it was a popular topic amongst school bullies. "It's not that kind of party, Mom," I lied as I rolled my eyes dramatically. "Whatever you say," she shrugged, flashing a toothy grin. Mom's long blonde hair fluttered in the breeze as she waved goodbye. Her deep green eyes shimmered with pride, hoping in vain that I'd form some semblance of a friendship. The party was a major letdown. I won't bore you with too many details, but only about 10 people actually showed up, including us. I didn't realize how gross beer would taste, but I somehow managed to choke down a couple of Budweisers. After being hit on by nearly every guy at the party, I begged Stephanie to take me home. She was having more fun than I was, but after some persisting, she begrudgingly caved. The ride back to my house was marred by a tense, uncomfortable silence. As Stephanie hurriedly peeled away, I stumbled up the driveway and fished into my pocket for my house key. I'd gotten a little more tipsy than I realized, and my already lackluster cognitive skills eluded me. I eventually located the key, though. I jabbed at the keyhole, and after a couple of sloppy attempts, the door clicked open. I crept up the stairs as silently as I could in my inebriated state, putting forth my best effort not to wake up my mother. Once I made it up the stairs, I ran through my nightly bedtime routine and retreated to my room. I popped into bed and tried to drift off to sleep, the immense disappointment of the night still fresh in my mind. After a few minutes of restlessly tossing and turning, I picked up on a noise at my balcony door. I perceived that the sound was like a faint tapping on the glass. Tap, tap, tap. I drowsingly glanced over at my alarm clock. Midnight. I ignored it and rolled onto my side, facing the wall. Probably just a tree branch. But then, the tapping escalated to 3 knocks in rapid succession. Tap, tap, tap. I shot up in bed as a pang of fear coursed through me. I whipped my head to the balcony, fully expecting to lock eyes with some horrid creature, and nothing. It must have been the alcohol messing with my head. A little shaken up, I laid back and somehow fell into a fitful slumber. The following morning, I woke up to the tantalizing aroma of bacon and eggs wafting upstairs from the kitchen. I stumbled out of bed and groggily traced the scent downstairs, where Mom was cooking breakfast. "Good morning, sleepyhead," she giggled. "Morning," I croaked, trying and failing to rub the sleep out of my eyes. "Did you have fun last night?" Mom asked, as she placed a mouth-watering concoction of eggs, bacon, and toast before me. "Yeah, I guess," I wearily replied, shoveling food into my mouth. I wasn't feeling great from the night before, and the hot meal was just what the doctor ordered. "Meet any cute guys?" Mom prodded, a smile plastering itself across her face. "Oh yeah, some real cute Leonardo DiCaprios," I sarcastically remarked, mouth nearly overflowing with eggs. "By the way, you didn't hear any knocking from any of the windows last night, did you?" I inquired nonchalantly. "No. When did you hear that?" she asked quizzically, concern washing over her countenance. Never mind. It was probably just a tree branch," I blundered between chews, attempting to ease Mom's tension. "Okay, just please let me know if you hear it again," she requested sternly, seeming relieved by my statement. The remainder of the day was mostly uneventful. After breakfast, I wasted the day watching Netflix. I finished off my evening by knocking out some homework. It was Saturday, but getting my work out of the way early provided me a sense of productivity. After putting my books away and brushing my teeth, I hopped into bed. I'm usually off in dreamland no later than 10:30, and that night was no different. I laid back and shut my eyes, but I was having an uncharacteristically tough time falling asleep. I was overthinking, stressing myself out over the upcoming chemistry exam, something I felt wildly unprepared for. I had just started to nod off when I heard it. the same rhythmic tapping on my balcony door. Tap, tap, tap. I lazily turned to the clock. Midnight. Before I could divert my attention to the noise, it started again, but this time it was much louder. Tap, tap, tap. Again, I bolted upright and fixed my gaze on the balcony. My heart pounded against my rib cage, and I thought it would leap through my chest at any given moment. I could have sworn for a split second that I glimpsed a shadow ducking out of view. I don't have to tell you, I was more than a little creeped out at this point. I shined my flashlight at the door and discovered an absence of creepy shadow people. I laid back down and breathed deeply in an attempt to regulate my racing heart. I again wrote it off as a tree branch or my mind playing tricks on me, and eventually I managed to doze off. The tapping continued every night going forward. Right at midnight, I'd be ripped from my peaceful slumber to a commotion at the balcony that wouldn't cease until I'd inevitably turn to face it. And every time, there was nothing there. After a couple of weeks, it was beginning to take a toll on me. I was sleep-deprived. My grades began to slip. People started to notice. Concerned teachers pulled me aside and asked if everything was okay at home. Classmates were telling me I looked like a ghost. Mom repeatedly questioned me on it, but I just told her that I was stressed about the exams. I desperately needed to put a stop to this incessant tapping. One night, I'd had enough. As usual, at midnight, I was yanked from my peaceful sleep. I had made up my mind. This time, I was going to ignore it. It started off light. Tap, tap, tap. Then it grew louder and increased in frequency. Tap, tap, tap. I was determined not to look. I kept my eyes firmly shut, even when the slapping turned into a pounding. Boom, boom, boom. I was beginning to worry that whatever or whoever it was would crack the glass. Irritated, I relented, and my eyes wandered to the double doors. What I saw chilled me to my very core. There was a man standing on the balcony. Dirty, tattered clothing hung off his emaciated frame like rags. He was deathly thin, reminiscent of a skeleton, with his skin stretched tightly over bones. Stringy, greasy black hair fell past his shoulders. The wide smile that blossomed across his face revealed black gums and yellow, rotting teeth. His manic expression never faltered, but worst of all were his eyes. Those black, pinpoint pupils connected to mine, and I could sense something beneath them, even through the glass. Hunger, a deep animalistic drive that I can only describe as predatory. Then he spoke. "Oh, Sydney, I can see you," he sang in a sickly sweet tone. "Please let me in. I just want to play," he called, giddy with excitement. My heart dropped into my stomach. Something sinister lurked just beyond the surface of those words. He licked his lips, his disgusting gray tongue worming its way around the rim of his mouth. I tried to avert my gaze, but I was rooted in fear. Sweat pooled on my brow, and my hands shook uncontrollably. My breathing became rapid and shallow. A million thoughts raced through my brain in unison. Who was this man? How did he get onto my second-floor balcony? How the hell did he know my name? I was broken from my trance by the forceful hammering against the door. The man's smile was gone, having developed into an expression of pure hatred. "Let me in, you bitch! Let me in! Let me in!" With each repetition, his fist smashed against the glass, rattling the door in its frame. Then, out of nowhere, he paused, eyes eagerly lighting up as his twisted smile returned, stretching so far that I thought the corners of his mouth might tear. "It's okay, Sydney. You won't let me in, then I'll do it myself, 'cause I found where you hid the key." He could barely contain his elation as he produced an ancient rusted key from an indistinguishable pocket in his ragged clothes. My head spun and my vision blurred. This couldn't be happening. He slipped the key into the door and unlocked it with a nauseating click. At last, my body regained mobility, and I went into full panic mode. I leapt out of bed and bolted down the hall to my mom's room. The man's deranged cackling reverberated off the walls behind me. His thunderous footsteps were closing the distance. I burst through the door and slammed it shut, waking my mother in the process. "Sid, it's the middle of the night. What's going on?" she groaned lazily. I locked the door and sputtered a nearly incoherent string of words. "Mom, man, inside, police!" I choked out before I broke down, tears streaming down my face. The hallway had gone eerily silent as I sobbed hysterically. Mom stared at me for a second, bewildered, but she did call the cops. They took a statement from me and combed through the house. Of course, by then the man was long gone, and there wasn't much they could do. The balcony doors were even shut and locked when they arrived, so there was no evidence that the man had been on the property at all. They urged us not to hesitate to call back if he returned, and reassured us that they'd send a cruiser down our street intermittently for the next few nights. I slept in Mom's room for a week after that. I questioned her about the hidden spare key, but she swore up and down that there were only 2 house keys. We installed cameras and a home security system, but even then I couldn't bring myself to sleep in that room again. I moved all my things down the hall into an unoccupied room, away from the balcony. Suddenly, every resonance terrified me. Noises that I had previously attributed to the age of the house didn't sound like the normal creaks and whistles anymore. I started going to therapy. After a few weeks, the therapists, my classmates, even my mom, had begun to convince me that I had imagined the whole ordeal. I almost believed them. Almost. My therapist told me that I would never be able to fully heal until I stepped out onto that balcony. So about a month after the incident, I finally built up enough courage to walk out there. I rested my hands on the smooth white marble and peered out over the neighborhood. Spring was among us, and the flowers were in full bloom. I soaked it all in as the wind blew my hair and the dragonflies zipped past my face. I watched a robin feeding its babies in the tall oak tree in our front yard. Bushy-tailed squirrels bounced along, searching for acorns. It was picturesque. I felt completely at peace, standing there just observing nature. All the stress I'd built up from that night was immediately washed away. Until I glanced down, because as I lifted my hands off the stone railing, a strand of long silver hair clung to my fingers.